now call to order the Monday, February 24th, 2025 meeting of the Hayden, City of Hayden Planning and Zoning Commission.
Commissioner David Erickson. I'm doing roll call.
Oh, present.
All right. Commissioner Joel Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Chris Morris.
Here.
Commissioner Keith Gibson.
Here.
Vice Chair Mary Howard.
Yes.
Chair Sean Taylor.
Here.
All right, we are good to go.
All right, let's stand for the pledge. David, do you want to lead us? Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions or corrections to the, or not? Okay. Do you have any conflicts of interest tonight? No.
Nope.
Okay. First item is our consent calendar. Any discussion? Any motions? No?
Are we approving all three at the same time? Okay.
Do you want to state what they are for the record?
Yes, I sure will. I make a motion that we approve the consent calendar, which involves approval of meeting minute notes of Planning and Zoning Commission January 27th, 2025, which was a joint workshop with the City Council. Approval of February 3, 2025, which was just a Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting, and approval of the written decision for PZE-24-0150 McAllister Technical Services, Inc. conditional use permit.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Morris.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Howard.
Aye.
Chair Taylor.
Aye.
Okay.
We'll now have a public hearing on the Hayden Sky Final Planned Unit Development. That's way too fast. Donna, would you like to present? Didn't talk about cell phones, but.
So, nearly a year ago, we were before you with a request for a preliminary planned unit development. And as the Planning and Zoning Commission is aware, a planned unit development has two parts, kind of the 30,000 foot level. You address the, can you build it here and does it meet certain standards of approval at that high level? And then the final planned unit development kind of gets a little bit into the nuts and bolts of how you actually make it work, a little bit where the rubber meets the road. And then a subdivision, preliminary plat, would actually look at how does it meet the road and can it be constructed to meet those final planned unit development standards of approval. So before you, just before we get started, for a matter of interest, is that on your tablets you have access to the staff analysis, which I'm going to be referencing this entire presentation when I get up, and Eric may as well when he does his presentation. In front of you, you also have an 11 by 17 of what this planned unit development, this is E1 that's referenced in the staff analysis, just in case they're talking or I'm talking and it's all a bunch of words up there and you need to kind of see what it looks like. That's why that's in front of you. And then also in front of you, and so does the audience, those participating in the audience who may want to provide comments during public hearing, the public comment piece, there are standards of approval that should the Planning and Zoning Commission during their deliberations, they're going to need to find that they've met those standards of approval, and whether or not there are any additional conditions or the conditions that are in there may need to be modified as you recommend this for either approval or denial or more work moving forward. So those are the standards that this analysis talked to. I've also asked Rob Wright, our city engineer, to be here for this to help out with any questions related to infrastructure that I probably can't figure out how to answer, so it's possible. Okay, so everybody got the lay of the land a little bit? All right. So just as a matter of background for those folks that may or may not have been here when we did the preliminary planned unit development. In 1991, the property was annexed into the city of Hayden. It was de-annexed by a court order, and then it went annexed again by the owner request in 2013 by Ordinance 524. That annexation, they had an annexation agreement, had a lot, it talked about infrastructure, it talked about sewer, it talked about water. But there were three notable points of interest in the annexation agreement. The first being that it had a 225-foot plus or minus strip adjacent to Hutter Road was required to be set aside in anticipation of a future Hutter bypass. The gross residential density of the annexed area was limited to 4 dwelling units per acre. And 15 acres of the property must be provided for a park. Those are all requirements of the annexation agreement. The annexation agreement is attached in the staff analysis, I believe. The property today consists of undeveloped grassland or hayfield for the most part, several structures on the southeast corner of the project. There's a well house up in kind of the central north portion of the project. The existing home is proposed to be removed during redevelopment of the property, should this request be granted. So at the conclusion of the preliminary plan unit development, after it had a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission and a public meeting with City Council, the preliminary planned unit development was approved with conditions. And the written decision was approved on May 14th of 2024, and in your staff analysis, that starts on page 35. So the request before you tonight for the final plan unit development has the applicants, which are Dale Rainey and Dave Bailey, and Eric Olson of Olson Engineering will be presenting. The owners of the property are 4J Limited Partnership and Mills Family Tree Farms, LLC. And the applicant in their request identified that the vision of Hayden Sky is to create housing for a community in desperate need of a wider range of housing options. The request identifies a mix of housing options, and it recognizes a light industrial component, but also recognizes the limitation of light industrial uses in concert and not in conflict with the predominantly residential uses of the approximately 127 plus or minus gross acres of the project site. The project is anticipated to be constructed in 4 phases, with the parkland to be developed in the 3rd and 4th phase. Just as a matter of look-see, this is the location of the project. It is north of what is on your zone maps that are kind of out there in front of you. It is north of the commercial zone designation full length of Hayden Avenue, and it consists of the residential and light industrial zoning for that property. And as you note on here, you can see this funny little kind of, word blurb in here. They did a boundary line adjustment prior to the request for the planned unit development that mirrored that zoning designation, and that will come forward later. All right, I'll pass it over to Eric, I think. Are you starting out?
Yeah.
Just getting my bearings here. All right, Eric Olson, Olson Engineering, 1649 North Nicholson Center Court in Post Falls. Here tonight with, as mentioned, Dale Rainey, who's the building designer for this project, Dave Bailey, the owner's representative. Dale will be helping me out with the second part of this presentation. This is the map, well, an updated version of the map that Donna had on the screen just a second ago. Sorry about that. She mentioned the boundary line adjustment. There used to be a strange shaped parcel here, and it's been adjusted down so that we've got this flag shape. and that flag shape is not a part of this PUD. It is owned by the same group. It's commercially zoned, so it would eventually be likely developed as commercial, but it's not part of the PUD. Just pointing out other items in terms of proximity, the airport, the west end of the airport's here, Meyer Road to the west, Atlas Road to the east. I believe you guys have heard some recent subdivision applications for North Winds down here and Battleground as well. So this is our current layout. It's quite similar for those of you that were here for the presentation, which has now been about a year ago. It's very similar to the preliminary PUD layout. A couple of small changes. We used to have roads going around this these townhome blocks right here, but there were a couple of reasons. We didn't feel like those roads were serving much of a function, and they tended to funnel traffic towards this area, which is a little too close to the Hayden and Downing intersection. So those were removed, and as a result, there'll be a lot more green space around these townhomes. We've eliminated cul-de-sacs and knuckles. Your engineering department doesn't like those things very much, so they're gone. We eliminated, there used to be a little road connection in this area. There were a couple of reasons, and we felt like eliminating this road connection near a potential intersection with Hayden and Hutter was a good idea. And we also added in this road connection over here to Carrington, which we felt like provided more opportunities to distribute traffic over to this Carrington Street and what will eventually likely be a signalized intersection right here, and away from Downing, which will be not an unsignalized 3/4 turn movement intersection. Well, let's see. So yeah, we've also we have a couple of changes to lot dimensions, but more or less it was just kind of shuffling things around. We actually ended up with one fewer residential unit than we had when we brought this to preliminary. So we have a total of 411 residential lots. That's a density of 3.22 per acre, which is less than the limit of 4 that was required by the annexation agreement. I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of the architecture. Dale will show you some more later. This is a layout of the townhome area that's kind of in the central southern portion. Everything's rear loaded for these units. And these are elevations of those structures, 4 per building, 2-car garages for each one of them. We've got some 45-foot wide lots. So here's a couple of options that we're looking at for those. 2-story options with the 1-car garage, again, trying to hit a variety of price points here. So lesser land, smaller structure, smaller price tag. For the 55 lots, 55-foot wide lots, which is what we have the most of by far. These are 2 of the options. I think there might have been another variant out there, but you got a ranch style option and a 2-story option, both with 2-car garages. So the rest of my presentation is going to be based on the approval standards for a final PUD. Approval standard number 1 is on the board here, and it basically references back to the preliminary PUD. And summarizing that, we needed to provide either a variety of housing types, a provision of we had to do open space anyway, efficient use of the land. Those were the type of things that we were talking about at the preliminary stage. And just straight right out of Donna's staff report, per the written decision with conditions, The project has met this requirement in concept. Additional information provided in the staff analysis should be reviewed to address this standard. So I think that's basically saying if you see anything in here that makes you think again about the preliminary approval, I'm just, didn't want to go into detail on all those previous ones. So here's standard number 2. The proposed PUD provides for adequate utilities, services, and parking to service the proposed development. I'm not going to read all of those. I simplified it. There we go. So it's basically each one of these, going back to here, it's water, wastewater, stormwater, dry utilities, and parking. Are we providing adequate provisions for those things? So we have kind of a little, or we have our master infrastructure plan over here. The green lines are sewer lines, the blue lines are water lines. On the water side of things, the property has been annexed into the Hayden Lake Irrigation District since the preliminary approval occurred. They have provided a will serve letter. Mains are stubbed to the property, and it's going to be on us. It's in the conditions of approval to transfer water rights and dedicate a well site. It's likely that well site may go in this kind of strange shaped portion of this, of the industrial portion of the project up there. As far as wastewater goes, the city of Hayden has provided a will serve letter. We've had some discussion and we've planned for sewer main sizes that are consistent with the sewer master plan. Basically everything kind of, you can think of this central line here as a trunk line. Everything's kind of feeding into that. And then it would ultimately be tied in across the street where those apartments are and pumped to the wastewater treatment plant from there. Stormwater.
So can I interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
So what pump station is this gonna go to?
I'm sorry, I don't know the name of it. You want to help me out with that one,
What
Rob?
was the question?
What pump station is this going to go to?
H7.
So is that the one that they're building?
No, that
The ones or is that the one next to?
H7 was constructed as part of the Carrington
The apartments?
subdivision,
Right there?
prior to the apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. As far as stormwater goes, we're not proposing any changes to the standard city road sections. So we've got 10-foot swales on both sides of the street. Generally, those are adequate to handle both treatment and disposal of stormwater. Might have some different thoughts after this last weekend. But it's good aquifer soil there. Power, gas, communications, those items are going to be run in easements alongside the road. We've also got some areas, kind of tough to see on this one, but there's some open space tracks along Downing where if we've got a big communications vault or something like that needs to go in, we've got space for that. And as far as parking goes, the streets will be wide enough for parking on both sides. Obviously, a single-family residence will have a garage and a driveway. All of our townhomes also actually have 2-car garages, driveways, and overflow parking within those townhome sites. On to standard number 3. This is transportation related. Integrated transportation network. So part A here talks about continuation of arterial and collector streets, meeting city standards in a manner consistent with the city's adopted transportation master plan. So this is a little snippet. Basically this square that I'm outlining here is this over here. So we're following that fairly closely. This squiggly line through the middle is Downing over here. This diagonal line is continuation of Dakota, which we've got along with the curves that are needed for the design speed. And then we've got Phantom along the airport boundary there that would kind of dive down and connect just like it's shown here. So following the master plan pretty closely there. As far as part B is circulation and snow storage, definitely took a harder look at circulation between preliminary and final, and those are some of the things I was talking about earlier, eliminating some road connections and adding another. Snow storage will be dealt with through roadside swales. Again, we don't have cul-de-sacs or knuckles. Those are generally the problem areas for snow storage, so should be fairly straightforward on these streets. And part C is pedestrian and bicycle network. All of these streets will have either sidewalks or multi-use pathways on both sides. And actually, yeah, Hayden Avenue will have a multi-use path. Downing Street will have a multi-use path, and Carrington will. And that meets some provisions requiring those in order to access to get a variety of people to the park in whatever manner they want to get there. Let's see.
Will you be connecting Dakota to Hutter?
Eventually, it's, so that's up in phase 4. So it's anybody's, I mean, if it all continues like it is right now and nothing changes with the Hutter bypass, then the answer is yes.
Okay.
But if something changes there, then we're gonna be, I think that's, the conditions of approval are written in such a way that they're kind of adaptable to what happens with that Hutter bypass. This is our current concept for the Hutter and Hayden intersection. That intersection will be built as part of this project. What we're showing here is a realignment of it to the east. The primary reason that we're looking at that is because there's some significant Avista transmission power lines that run along the east side of Hutter Road. And in order to get all of these, the size of this intersection in there would take out one of those towers and be a major expense. So we figured this is supposed to be a temporary solution here, then let's do something that doesn't involve those costs. It also utilizes some of the dedications. I'm gonna go back a slide here. So this is this reservation here, and it actually continues through the commercial tract. And as you've seen on some of the other subdivisions, continues to the south where the developers have had to set aside ground for Hutter. So we figured, well, we may as well use it. Because if we tried to have the intersection over here, we'd have the power line issue, and we'd also be looking at right-of-way acquisition from a couple of these property owners. So Mr. McNabb, who owns this property to the southeast, has agreed with this conceptually. There's still some things that would need to happen between now and when this gets built to make sure we have all the right permissions, but this is what we're thinking for that intersection.
And when it goes to the north end, so into your subdivision, how close is that going to go to the homes, lots 23 through 18 here on the north part?
Good question. I think that starts to get back, actually, you know what? I knew there was a reason we drew that line there. That line represents where the road gets back on its present alignment.
Okay, thank
So
you.
it would only impact the proximity of the commercial.
Okay.
This exhibit here shows the potential lane configuration at a Carrington Hayden, likely a traffic signal. Basically, you got the full build out of Hayden Avenue coming in, full build out of Carrington on the north. We wouldn't be able to complete this signal yet because in a final condition, we would set it up that way, of course, but because the right-of-way is very tight to this private property owner down here in this corner. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dale for the rest of the standards of approval.
Thank you, Eric. Dale Rainey, Rainey Design Group, 9137 North Raintree Lane in Hayden. And good evening, commissioners. So I'm going to pick up where Eric left off at number 4. And so this site, conserving and incorporating site-significant natural, scenic, and historic features. Really, it's a hayfield at this point, so there's nothing real significant about it at this point. B, integrating a mix of compatible land uses. So we were really strategic when we designed this originally, and some of you may have seen it before, where we have the commercial along Hayden Avenue, and we placed the townhomes and the smaller residential lots in red, as you can see down here in the lower right, between this higher density commercial and the single family. So we kind of transitioned from higher impact to lower impact. Did the same thing up here. These townhomes here are between single family residential and this industrial piece. This industrial piece, the current zoning is, overlay is industrial in this area. And we really envision this as being a low impact storage. So mini storage or some kind of storage, but we're not talking industrial where it's manufacturing and such. So something compatible with these uses. We have buffers in place between the commercial and the townhomes on the south side. This distance between the townhomes and this, which will become a block wall, is about 147 feet. So we were really conscious of taking this entire area and basically making it a landscape park area to give it kind of a campus feel, to provide some distance between this commercial use and the townhomes. And again, there will be a block wall between the commercial and the entire PUD. Let's see where I'm at. D, provide at least 10% of the gross land area for open space. This has been accomplished with the 2 parks, which total about 15 acres. This southern park is about 8 acres. And we've designed this in a way to be more of an active park. So baseball diamond, soccer fields, basketball, things of that nature, tennis. So, a park that's going to generate a little bit more noise can handle the larger activities. This northern park, which has a pedestrian connection through here and kind of also a traffic slowing device, is going to be more for a play structure, picnic areas, large grass areas, things of that nature. And the reason we did that is all of these lots are kind of grouped around this park, and you really wouldn't want something loud and, kind of obnoxious going on out here. So this would be a quieter one. Maybe you take the kids up there and, this is where the soccer game or softball game's gonna happen. Section 5.
Sorry, do you have a question for you? Do you have any connectivity to Carrington with that?
Pardon me?
Is there any connectivity across to the subdivision to the east with that?
Yes, Dakota goes through.
Okay, because we had some concerns from the neighbors to the east on that they didn't get their park yet, and it's going across the street, so
Yeah.
this will actually give them some park access?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we get a little further in the design process, we really would like to solicit comment from the residents in that area, because I think this park serves both these developments equally, because of the proximity, and that's another reason we held it to the east side. It made a lot of sense to serve both those neighborhoods that way. Number 5, timely development of the property and security for future completion. So each development block basically can be developed, independent. We phased it in such a way that the park is in phase 3. We need dirt from the park area as fill for phase 4. So there's been a strategic reason for the way it is phased. All of the high impact improvements are going to occur in phase 1. So the Hayden-Hutter intersection, as well as the Carrington-Hayden intersection, the widening of Hayden Avenue, all of those occur in phase 1. So I live in Hayden. I'm not too far from this. I'm not happy with the traffic either. I know a lot of people, that's always going to be a concern, is traffic. I just would like to point out this development didn't cause the traffic. but it is going to solve a lot of the traffic problems. And the developer, at a significant expense, millions of dollars, is going to put these improvements in before we put a house up. So I just like to make that point because I know it's a common concern of the residents and myself. C is funding mechanism to adequately maintain common areas, and essentially this is an HOA. So we'll have an HOA and likely a sub HOA for the townhomes. So we'll probably have a master and then a sub because the single family is not going to want to pay for that park area for the townhome. So we'll separate that off. 6, so this is provisions with respect to height bulk setbacks. So there are some setback deviations from what is typical on an 8,250 square foot typical residential lot in the city of Hayden. Typically you have 10-foot side yard minimums, and you have a 25-foot front yard and a 25-foot rear yard. Because this development has smaller lots, we're asking for some deviations to that. We are going to maintain 20 foot to the front of the garage for parking for vehicles. That's a city of Hayden standard, and that will be maintained. We're asking for the side yard setbacks to be combined to add up to 15 feet. So that could be 5 and 10, 7.5, 7.5, and that is, correct me if I'm wrong, I know Hayden Canyon's like this. There are other PUDs in the city that have this combination of setbacks. The front and rear combined would be 40-foot minimum. So hypothetically, you could have, 15 in the back and 25 in the front, or 15 in the front, 25 in the back, but 40-foot minimum combined. The townhomes are slightly different because we have a side yard of 0 because they're attached. But we've set them up so there's at least 20 feet between the townhomes, and so we've put parking area there. And the
I mean,
rear
between
setback is the drive aisle.
between the combined units.
Yeah, they're basically 4 units per building.
Right,
and then
okay.
we will, we have a minimum of 20 feet between them.
Between
And
those.
in a lot of cases, more. There's I don't know if I can go back to it. See, these are the northern ones, and we have 20 feet. Some are more than that. These guys, really hard to see, or my eyes are bad. But, that's 3 parking spaces. So obviously there's, we have 40 plus feet between these buildings. So we really wanted to keep an open area and not super dense. Oh, actually, hey, it's easier there. Yeah, 40.
So, excuse me, I understand what's in the purple where the townhouses are.
Yes.
What is this over to the right, closer to the 3? What are those style homes there?
These red lots here, those are 45-foot wide lots.
Okay, and what are you putting on those?
They're single-family detached.
Oh,
So with a 15-foot combined side yard, you could put a 30-foot wide house. So hypothetically, 2-car garage and then 10-foot.
okay.
So we really put the higher density product down here. And as you go up, the lots get bigger. Like these are larger estate-sized lots in this area. And the thought was, you have a high-density use and you have low-density use, and you kind of transition through. So that's the reason for that. Talk about buffers a little bit. So the PUD code requires a 25-foot buffer between the PUD and other properties. That's around the entire PUD. So along the south sides, we've accomplished that with this park area and a block wall. Along Carrington, there's a 25-foot with a multimodal path. On the north side, we're asking for a waiver of the buffer requirement between the industrial and the airport. And the reason for that is that the airport is building an elevated berm along the southern side of the airport. And in talking to the director, they want to be able to drive a security vehicle on the berm to do a perimeter sweep of the airport. They've asked us to contribute any excess dirt we have to contribute to that berm. They're going to just grass it and not irrigate it. I believe that's in your staff report. They don't want any trees or bushes up against the airport because it attracts birds. So we've asked for no additional buffer requirement on this side of the fence, just because it would be redundant, because we have the one on the north side that they're building. On the west side, up against Hutter, we're asking for a deferral of that until phase 4. Just kind of buying time to see what happens with Hutter. If it gets developed, then we'll put that in. And I believe in the staff report, it calls for bonding provision in phase 4. If there's a deferral at that point, there'll be a bonding for a surety bond for the performance of that. So I think those are the two, I guess, requests, is a waiver here and the deferral here of the buffer. I think. That is the end of my presentation.
I had a question for you
Yes, sir.
regarding the ramp-shaped park on the
This guy?
southern one right there.
Yep.
Would it be problematic, other than obviously applying costs to developing it sooner, to include that with phase 1 or phase 2 to provide all those newer residents with an outlet for park?
It would be difficult to do it in phase 1 because we need to actually strip the topsoil off of this and then dig down probably 10 to 12 feet to get structural fill to build up this western side and this side as well. So, there's also some thought put into how the utilities connect and the sewer lines and the progression of that as well. Eric could probably speak a little bit more to that, the engineering side of it, but we have set it up in a way that it makes sense to actually construct it, so.
Got it. I guess the second part of that question would then be, let's say in a perfect world, all the approvals come in a timely fashion, the phases are built in a timely manner. How long roughly would it take between completion of phase 1 to completion of phase 3?
So I believe in the report, I think we're calling for 2 to 3 years per phase. Hypothetically, you could go faster than that. But, I think you're still, I think you're still 4 or 5 years out,
Yeah.
For that phase realistically.
Okay.
So I have a question about Downing and Hayden. Explain in detail what that intersection will look like.
So this will be a right in and a right out. So you're not gonna be able to come out Downing and turn left onto Hayden. I know there's some concern about that, backing up. So I believe it's a right in, right out, and I think it's a left in. Is that correct? So if you're coming east, you could get into the turn lane and turn
Or
left.
you can
in.
cross the road.
Yeah, I think there would be a turn lane because it's a,
It's got a two-way left turn lane as part of the standard section there.
So will there be a
That's-
concrete
yeah,
divide
yeah.
then, or?
he doesn't have that intersection, but essentially there's a turn lane into, yeah. So you back over here, obviously, but you'd enter the turn lane and turn.
We did really want that left in, because it would have made access to those commercial areas
Hey, Eric,
really difficult otherwise.
hey, Eric, can you go up there when you talk?
Yeah.
Because they're never gonna pick you up on the microphone. Thank you.
We can trade back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we did really want that left in to Downing, otherwise it would have really made it difficult to provide access to these commercial areas. So 3/4, right in, right out, left in.
Will there be a concrete barrier, kind of like the one on Prairie, just west of Ramsey?
We haven't gotten to that stage yet. What do you think, Rob?
I think we will work that out during the design.
Question.
We have to come up with some way to to prevent the lefts out.
Yeah.
And so a concrete barrier probably is likely.
Okay.
My last question would be for the very southern single-family units, 23 and 253. Sorry.
Grab my version of this.
So I understand there'll be a block wall separating right there. What is that distance, that little separation, that's that little green?
Oh, yeah, that is a 10-foot wide tract.
Got it. And I assume that meets the standards for a separation of,
It's 25 feet all around. So I think that.
Of your
I think
exterior
we were-
boundary, yeah.
Yeah, we were proposing that the wall as kind of an amenity to that 10 feet to meet the intent of that 25-foot buffer.
got it.
So is that not a landscape buffer? Is that homeowner's responsibility? Is that HOA responsibility? Is that the commercial side's responsibility?
That would be the HOA's responsibility. The plantings are gonna be on the residential side of
Okay.
that wall. So yes.
Okay. I apologize to have you
Okay.
backtrack. Can you tell me again how this, I'm on a bike, the school is not that far that direction, over a couple of subdivisions. In the other subdivisions, we saw where their connectivity was. Explain to us where the connectivity is to the parks, to the other subdivisions, crossing Hayden and making it over to what I'm assuming will be an elementary school.
You're talking to the south where the school site is? Yeah, gotcha. So, the crossing is going to be encouraged to take place at the intersections. That's where there will be signalized crossings there. So basically, if you live in this neighborhood, you would hop on the sidewalk or the multi-use path and make your way down to Hayden, whether it's through this corridor or this corridor right here. Get yourself over to this corner, cross Hayden Avenue, and then we're counting on our neighbors to provide that connectivity to the south, from the south side of Hayden Avenue all the way down to that school site.
Okay. So are we talking 4-foot sidewalk? Are we talking 8-foot? What are we talking?
Yeah,
For
so
connectivity?
typically on these interior residential streets, you've got 5-foot concrete sidewalk on both sides of the street. On Downing, I believe there will be a 5-foot sidewalk on the west side of Downing and a 10-foot multi-use path on the east side of Downing. There's also gonna be Carrington right now, I believe, has a sidewalk on the east side, and we'll have a 10-foot meandering multi-use path on the west side as part of our proposal.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Anything else?
What do you see on?
Get to you later. All right.
Are we in the public comment?
Nope,
Nope, Don, that's right.
But if you do want to say something, comment if he has a question, you can call it. Say that now.
Because you do that, right?
I'm gonna try to hop, skip, and jump that presentation, not
Okay.
bore you with it twice.
Are you saying the first version is boring?
I'm not. I'm saying that if I had to do it twice, it would probably be boring.
It was riveting.
So again, just to kind of reiterate, final development plan for a PUD. The first 5 or 6 pages of your staff analysis reiterated all of the things that the applicant had to provide for us to review in order to get here. And then for the most part, they were attached in the applicant's documents that they provided to your staff analysis. So the typical sections that Mr. Olson was talking about are actually in there in the back with the construction plans that identify the widths of the sidewalks and pathways, just as a matter of interest. And the applicant's materials begin on page 65 of the staff analysis in the PDF. Once we go through all of the standards of approval, then we hit all of the conditions of approval. We're going to try to summarize those as well. The Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council. So you're not the final decider, but you do make a recommendation to City Council. You can approve it with staff conditions, or you can deny. And then it goes to the City Council for their review. And as I get through here, generally speaking, when it goes to the City Council, it goes as a public meeting, as the preliminary PUD did. But staff anticipates hearing from at least 2 other public agencies at a minimum, and potentially a property owner or 2 that we will want to include as part of the record. And the only way to do that is to have another public hearing before the City Council. We anticipate that to happen probably the last meeting in March, assuming we make a decision tonight. If we don't, it'll get pushed out, but it is what it is. So that's just a matter of process. So as we're looking for standards, the first standard of approval is to ensure that we've met the intent and the purpose of the Hayden zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan, and that was almost entirely addressed in the preliminary plan unit development, and the written decision is attached to the staff analysis in its entirety on page 35, and we're on page 8 of your staff analysis in your review of those standards. So then the second standard of approval begins also on page 8, and addresses that Hayden Lake Irrigation District. And if you go back in the agency comments of Hayden Lake Irrigation District, there's a lot of back and forth because we had bits and pieces of information and not a complete story. And so I think Eric did a pretty good job explaining the fact that they have been annexed into the Hayden Lake Irrigation District as of January of this year, and that they do have a well site, and that well site will be transferred in ownership to the district, and they have an agreement with the district on how that gets developed in that area and what happens there. With relationship to sewer, it is in the H7 sewer basin, and that sewer lift station is constructed south of Hayden Avenue, and Alan Soderling, our Public Works Director, did provide a will serve on September 24th for the 411 dwelling units that were identified. HARBS, which is the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board, that's the treatment plant. They did provide a comment in the agency comments requesting an odor easement over the property. That was in December of 24. The stormwater system, as Mr. Olson identified, is anticipated to follow kind of our typical design where you have swales on both sides of the streets. You have pavement, curbs, and swale, sidewalk or multimodal path. And in those swales, you've got some trees, 1 tree for every house pretty much planted. But if during the time, during construction, we find that maybe that won't work, they might have to do additional stormwater analysis and put that in a tract to address it that way. But the prairie gravels are well known for their drainability. Other utilities, you've got electric, gas, phone, those are all provided underground. And they are all reviewed at the time of construction plan submittal, primarily in those utility easements that are provided. Those great big large electrical transmission lines that are on that side of Hutter are not really very easy to move or bury. So we are proposing that those are not buried at this point in time as part of this development, but really reviewed once we figure out what's going on with Hutter. And then that's sufficient parking. One of the requests that we did for the application was for the applicant to really look at what the building envelopes looked like for each of these lots and to verify that they could actually get to parking spaces for each dwelling unit. And as they noted, even the townhomes do address those 2 parking space requirements for each dwelling unit in the townhome, as do the single-family detached housing that they're proposing. And then any of the development in the light industrial review, we will review those parking requirements at the time of the site plan. And any required parking in the parks will also be reviewed once we actually figure out what's going in the parks. So I kind of took the transportation requirements down a different path, which I thought was beneficial. The third standard identifies that the transportation network works. So today, out there, you have a proposed setback area of that Hutter right-of-way, future Hutter area. And if you kind of need a lineup of what that width looks like along there, is if you're looking at the substation building, it sits just east of that setback area south, walking up that swath. And then I took Mr. Olson's graphics and I applied them on top of that aerial, kind of showing how they're proposing to migrate this in that setback area. So it's set back, but it's not owned by the city as right-of-way. It's owned by the private property owner. This is Downing as you're kind of coming up from the south, or you're coming down through this proposed planned unit development, and how they kind of align, but you can't cross in there. And then this is that intersection that they identified that we don't really have the other side of. So I'm playing around with my mouse. So this area that's in green is not in the city limits. And this little bitty piece of right-of-way right in here between the red line and the blue line is actually in Post Falls Highway District's jurisdiction, not the city's jurisdiction. So it's not our right-of-way, it's their right-of-way. And as you most likely noted in the staff analysis and in the agency comments, Post Falls Highway District requested a copy of the staff review, and then they would provide comments. And we don't have their comments. Do we, Rob? Have you heard anything? Okay. So we do not have comments back from Post Falls Highway District with regard to the movement of the Hutter-Hayden intersection. And although it's no longer in their right-of-way, it does affect their right-of-way. So we would expect some response from that. And with respect to this intersection, we haven't heard from them either. And I would expect to hear back from them regarding that one as well. So that's a bit there. And then this piece of property is, yes, owned by the same owners, both the 4J folks and the Miller Tree folks. But at the end of the day, it's not a part of this planned unit development, so it's kind of separately. And the planned unit development code requires that should this final planned unit development be approved prior to us entering into a master development agreement, the ownership of this piece of property has to be under single ownership. I don't know which ones of one or both of those are going to own that at the end of the day. It may be both of them that own both. I just don't know. So today they both own it, but at the end of the day, these folks are going to need to be a single owner for us to move forward. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair sentence, Wanda?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So again, a few moving pieces there. In your letter, in your end of your agency comments section, and referred to in the staff analysis on, you can find it on page 63, but referred to in your staff analysis is an email from Scott MacArthur, who represents Thomas McNabb, who is the owner of the Core Technology Campus, this property on the south side of Hayden Avenue. And that's all we have from Mr. McNabb as far as, I mean, kind of, it's a wishy-washy. I'm going to let you read it, take your own, but we're not The city at this point is not agreeing to any of those terms or conditions that Mr. McNabb is laying out. That is entirely between him and them and not between us and him and them. Is that fair, Rob?
Correct.
Okay. So again, we want stuff to be entered into the record that we just don't have today. And as I explained to, or kind of pointed to Fonda, is that some jurisdictions will let you move forward with a process and contingent, make conditions that you have to meet in order to go to the next step. Other jurisdictions, they want all of this worked out up front before they'll let you go to the next step. We're kind of here in the middle, and I'm not sure where my sliding scale really lands. So I'm always trying to act on the side of caution.
But I think for clarification, the point that Donna really wants you to hear is that southeast landowner, where that realignment is occurring, that's an arrangement that will be made between these private development people and that private landowner. The city's not involved in that at this point, but they've gone as far as at least to provide you concept and then get a written statement from a representative from that landowner that he's willing to continue to work forward with them. But that's not
Exactly.
the city's responsibility.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yes.
So then I super injected underneath the actual plan itself, and I know that's a little messy, but I'm trying to show that it does meet that whole Downing does come up from the south and connect on up to Phantom. This is kind of a little out of sync because I have white up there, but Phantom does continue on and connect into Dakota. Dakota does come from the east and connect over, and this will either be a overpass or it'll connect into the road. Could you elaborate, Rob?
Say that again, please.
What happens at Phantom and Hutter, or Dakota and Hutter, whatever that is?
Phantom, as it moves up and kind of aligns with Miles to the far east, was always envisioned to have a connection to Hutter. Way back when, Hutter was a depressed road and there was going to be an overpass at that connection on the north.
Is there a reason why Downing and why the change in streets names there at Dakota at that intersection?
Downing continues from the south all the way to the north.
Uh-huh.
And Phantom continues from the east in the airport property and down, and they connect there.
Wouldn't it make more sense to have them change at the Carrington Road rather than
We'll
the
work through
Dakota?
it with the county as far as their 911
Okay,
folks.
it just seems
Solve
weird because you're in the
naming
subdivision to have two different names.
Yep. So there's a condition that we're gonna go back and, I'm gonna point to this, but, the request has been made to bring, Carrington to the north and end just short of the Dakota, Carrington intersection. And as you're coming out of the existing, subdivision and you're making a left, having this be narrow and then wider didn't seem like a good connection point. And so from an already existing neighborhood to come out onto Carrington, it made more sense to have that a continuation for safety purposes. Do you have something to add to that, Rob?
No, I do not.
Okay. So then related to pedestrian and bicycle system, I think that Mr. Olson and Dale did a really good job. All of the typical sections for all of the roadways, internal and external, show pedestrian access. They've also kind of shown some pedestrian access through the park, but I don't want you to fixate on what that park looks like. It's a great rendition of the possibilities that could be there. But because these will become public parks, there'll be a public park component to their design. And it might be a refinement of what's already started, or it might be something entirely different. So it's important to note that piece. The pedestrian path that wanders on the exterior of the project wanders within that 25-foot setback. area in conjunction with the 10-foot of swale area, so it's a pretty wide swath that they've got, keeping it really well separated from the remainder of the area. Okay, so standard number 4 is, have you enhanced the community design? That's on page 12 of the staff analysis. The reason I left the park in here is that during park design, if there's something that's found to be natural, scenic, and or historic feature that we may want to continue to recognize on this piece of property, we could do it in some thematic, could be done thematically with the park if it exists. Notice that says if any, so I'm not saying that there is, but it's possible. I think that Mr. Rainey did a great job showing the integration and mix of compatible land uses throughout the PUD. I won't revisit that. I did want to bring out the airport design. So when he was talking about the airport folks building the berm along the airport exterior area in here, this is the runway. So it is close, and having that separation important. So locating the proposed uses and lot sizes in the proposed PUD in a manner that blends. Again, I think they've already covered that. And providing at least 10% of the gross land area for open space that meets the recreational needs of the users of the development and provides for a variety of recreational uses consistent with the city's adopted parks master plan. So the annexation required 15 acres of the entire annexed area. They have 127 acres of the PUD, but they're including all of the annexation requirement to happen so that the park encompasses all of that in this area. The PUD requires 10% or 12.7 acres, and they don't get any density bonus allowances because of the annexation agreement limitation on the 4 dwellings per acre, anyway. So the 2040 Parks Master Plan anticipated a neighborhood park in this location and earmarked it with an NPSW3 as a long-term project. So because it's a long-term project, it's not recognized as part of the CIP for the park impact fee that exists today. So this is anticipated, the project is anticipated to be designed prior to phase 3. If they're going to develop and build it in phase 3, they need the design prior to that. And it's anticipated to be constructed as a requirement of the phase 3 approvals. Standard number 5 refers to that the infrastructure that could be developed in a timely manner and that there's some kind of security for future completion and maintenance. So on page 23 or 24, I can't remember which, of your PUD, it identifies in the subdivision construction plan, or subdivision construction conditions of approval, I can spit it out there, kind of a timing chart of when we anticipate, based on the information that we've been provided, when we anticipate this to be built. And as you can see, phase 1 is pretty heavy in infrastructure. Phase 2 kind of rides on laurels a little bit, because most of it's built. And then phase 3 is also pretty heavy in infrastructure. And then phase 4 is trying to figure out what Hutter is doing to figure out what they're doing. Each building in the development lot has sufficient access around the structure, and that was reviewed both by the city and by the fire department for emergency services and access for those, and it'll be reviewed again at the time of subdivision preliminary plat application by both the city and by the fire department. And then a funding mechanism exists to adequately maintain common areas that are not publicly maintained. So the 15 acres of park are going to be dedicated to the city and become public parkland. So the infrastructure that's maintained by the POA is all of the common areas that are in the planned unit development. We did attach to the staff analysis their draft POA documents. So you can see what your draft, not complete. They don't have to be complete until we get closer to the final. So standard number 6 says to achieve the purpose of this section, the developer may request modification or exceptions to the following development standards. That's on page 17 of your staff analysis. I did want to make one quick note that the city does require a 25-foot setback to the garage. You said 20, so I just want to make sure that we're at that point. 25 feet. And the reason that that 25-foot exists there is so that you're not, in theory, you're not overhanging across the sidewalks because you can't block a public sidewalk. So that's the reason for that 25-foot setback. The applicant's narrative notes that these variations should provide a more visually appealing product as it will look less like a grid upon completion. One of the things that we've heard many times over from this by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council is that you didn't like that kind of domino effect all the way down the block. And with this ability to kind of shift things back and forth to still allow for that 40-foot combined front and backyard setback, it can allow for a little bit more fluidity where those are located. And then that provision establishing buffering, landscaping, or other similar requirements pertaining to site design. The applicant did request to defer that PUD landscaping, and so at the time of the Phase 4 preliminary plat, we're going to address whether or not they're going to defer it or they're going to build something. And the landscaping will follow whatever they're doing on Hutter, so they'll be married together as part of those frontage conditions of approval. The E1 that you've got in front of you kind of shows the lay of the land and what those minimum or maximum dimensions of the lots are proposing to be. And they're estimating 3.22 dwelling units per acre, and there weren't any requests for exceptions related to driveways, local streets, and sidewalks for accessibility standards. And then you can always apply for a preliminary plat of your first subdivision in a planned unit development, which they did. And as we worked through this and worked through the conditions of approval, we kept running into circles, not knowing what the final conditions of approval were going to be. So we couldn't figure out what standard or what requirements we needed to have of the first plat in order to make that work. So should the final planned unit development be approved by council, they're pretty close to being ready to move the preliminary plat forward, assuming there aren't any huge red flags, forward next. So notices went to 28 public agencies, and they start on page 19. Idaho Transportation Department responded, and they talked about being consistent with all of our long-range plans. They wanted to note that Hutter is an alternate corridor for Highway 95. It's part of the KMPO's transportation plan, and it's a part of the PEL anticipated to be completed in summer of 2025. So that prairie, what does the PEL stand for, Rob?
Oh, don't ask me that question.
Anyway, it's the corridor studies across the prairie. They had started off with like 50 plus or minus. They whittled those down to 13, and they're hoping to get those whittled down to hopefully 1 or 2 by this summer. So we'll have an idea of what that Hutter may or may not look like. Kootenai County Community Development, Avondale Irrigation District, Idaho Fish and Game didn't have any comments. Panhandle Health District had requirements at the time of subdivision. Idaho Department of Water Resources talked about water right and changes of ownership and changing from an irrigation water right to something of beneficial use. Hayden Lake Irrigation District had that correspondence related to wells and water rights and annexing the district and their ability to serve. Idaho Department of Environmental Quality had requirements at the time of subdivision, reviews related to water and sewer main extensions, and then contact information. Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board asked for that odor easement over the plat. Coeur d'Alene Airport had correspondence related to concerns with the location of housing, and then they had buffer questions, and then they wanted to know if Phantom Drive was continuing. through from the airport into a public road. Then there was follow-up correspondence with staff regarding requested buffer areas. Light industrial or commercial property boundaries in planned unit developments butted up against like land uses can waive the requirement of having that PUD buffer in that location. That doesn't mean that at the time of site development of a landscaped lot, that they may or may not have landscaping that's required up against that northern boundary, depending on how their site is designed. So there still may be requirements for that, but not with respect to the buffer in that location for the PUD. We talked about Post Falls Highway District. Northern Lakes Fire Protection District provided comments related to future response times, review fees at time of subdivision and non-residential building permits, location and types of fire hydrants, water line construction for residential and non-residential users, approved turnarounds, secondary access roads, meeting the condition of the Idaho Fire Code, sprinkler systems and when they do and don't apply, and access roads. The fire department does reviews of all non-residential building permits, and they do reviews of all residential structures that are in excess of 2 dwelling units structures. So they would be reviewing the 4plexes, or the 4-unit townhomes, pardon me. Do identify the letter that we received from Thomas McNabb, and I added him to the public agency comments because he is an affected owner should this be approved. Received 3 public comments that are in board book. All were opposed. One had concerns regarding impact to Lakeland School District. One resident identified concern about response time for the emergency services, development paying for the impacts and property taxes, and one resident identified concerns over odors of the sewer system. Your staff recommended conditions of approval begin on page 20. We covered the first one. You'll have to get into single ownership. You have to reflect all necessary permanent dedications and easements on final plats. All permits from outside agencies shall be obtained prior to any construction, whether it's subdivision or individual building permits. The approval runs with the land for the term approved herein, regardless of whether the property ownership remains the same or not. Planned unit developments are generally approved for a 5-year period of time unless the applicant requests a longer period of time in order to finish the whole project.
And at what point would they make that request?
Probably in their rebuttal.
Oh, okay.
If they want one. Otherwise, you can ask for extensions to your approvals through a request to City Council.
Okay.
All development shall be in conformance with the annexation agreement. And as we talked about, this is, went from 30,000 to 5,000. As you get closer into those subdivisions, you're gonna do more and more analysis. And if things look like they need to be jostled a little bit, and that's a minor change, but if things jostle a lot, then it would mean that they need to come back and do an amendment of the planned unit development through the public hearing process. Staff analysis is based on the plan proposed by the applicant, and the conditions herein are developed on that proposal. So that's why that's all tied together in your staff analysis. And again, if they change any one of those big things like geographic boundaries or make huge timing changes or some other components that are big changes, then that same process that we talked about up in number 6 would happen. Mitigations related to the requirements identified in the transportation impact analysis and their timing shall be identified in the timing table in 15K, and infrastructure as required shall follow that. Talked about the property owners association, that one has to be created, and when those legal documents have to be recorded, and the fact that you have to have one that shows perpetual, it's always got a funding source to take care of itself, conversation. The dedication of the parkland and the open space needs to be free and clear of all liens and encumbrances. It needs to be in a format approved by the city. And if you say on a plat dedicated, That doesn't dedicate it to anybody. It has to have a deed that actually transitions it from one owner to another. Access basically has to follow the access standards that exist at the city with standards of approval. So this planned unit development has, the PUD itself has no frontage on Hayden Avenue. So none of the lots within the planned unit development have any direct access onto Hayden Avenue. No lot shall have access onto Hutter Road or onto Carrington Street. There shouldn't be any individual access onto Phantom because those are coming out of a townhome or they're coming out of a light industrial area, but not individual residences are coming out. No individual access shall be allowed on North Downing Lane from Hayden Avenue to Road C in Phase 1. And we talked about mailbox locations and where they can and can't go. And there isn't any parking allowed on Downing Lane, also from Hayden Avenue to Road C, and that shall be signed accordingly. The well lot site will become a lot within the subdivision of the phase that is, whatever the timing is based on their agreement, creates a well lot spot, and it will have road frontage, and it will be developed as any other lot is developed in the city. Easement language regarding odors as identified by HARBs shall be placed on each and every plat within the PUD. The CC&Rs of the POA shall address language to be included in any future lease rental to notify the tenant of the proximity of the sewer treatment plant. Construction plan requirements. Hayden's going to serve them sewer, and HLID is going to serve them water. A note shall be included in the landscape plans to identify a dry grass mix shall be applied until individual lots are constructed. The wind blows predominantly in the northwest area, but not all of the time. And there's a lot of topsoil out there. We want to make sure that we don't end up with a dust bowl going on out there. If swales are proposed in tracts, then they shall follow the Hayden City Code. Street frontage landscaping shall be included in the landscape plan of the subdivision with actual street placement to be completed at the time of building permit, except within the PUD buffer or within the green space tracts. Pathways, sidewalks, multimodal pathways in all areas except the park area shall be a requirement of subdivision construction. So part of the first plat requires that they build the north half width. So that's 2.5 lanes of Hayden Avenue from Hutter to Carrington. So 2.5 lanes of pavement, curbs, swales, and a multimodal path. That's the half width. They're required to build the intersection improvements at Carrington and Hayden, and those intersection improvements at Hutter and Hayden. The internal street shall be constructed to our standard ST 111 and 111A, that's across the city. And those intersection improvements along Hayden Avenue that impact properties not owned by the developer. Staff is saying that the developer shall secure ownership of these areas to be constructed and dedicated to the city and/or Post Falls Highway District prior to construction plan approval. That right-of-way documents in accordance with the approved construction plan shall be signed and ready for recordation prior to construction plan approval, and then they're recorded at the time of final plat and approval of infrastructure. Hutter Road is destined to be constructed at the time of the what's shown as phase 4 of the final PUD. It's the 4th preliminary plat or the final preliminary plat, whichever occurs first. And you probably read these conditions and think, why does she call these in a variety of different ways? And it's because we recognize the fact that as a planned unit development migrates through, that those lines of development sometimes get blurry. And so we just want to recognize that it has a time frame that it gets done by. But should those be deferred, then as part of the deferral, that performance surety be posted both for the right-of-way construction piece as well as for the landscaping piece, in accordance with city code standards and policies in effect at the time of the deferred improvement agreement. And then K is that chart that kind of shows what we anticipate getting built when. The park design shall occur at any time prior to the third preliminary plat, because again, you have to know what you're gonna build. And then 17 is the construction of the park area shall be completed prior to the final plat of the third final plat, or the second edition, or the area identified as phase 3, whichever occurs first. And then there are 5 requests by other agencies. The fire department, letter that was received and part of the agency comments. We believe that there was an navigation easement as part of the requirements for the annexation of the property, but the title report didn't reference it, so we're not certain if it ever got recorded. So we're in a hunt. So if it didn't get done, it needs to get done as prior to the first final plat. The developer shall record an easement acceptable to Harbs, identifying the language that was requested in completion in the staff review. Anytime there's cross-country water lines, that means they're not in right-of-way. They're kind of like just, I don't think there are any in here, but if there are, we need to have a 20-foot wide water line easement in accordance to Hayden Lake Irrigation District's requirements. And then we need to note in the CCNRs that their standard is to have a 10-foot clear zone of the meter vaults and the fire hydrants of all landscaping or borders or structures or 10-foot clear zone. And then that development of the well site in accordance with Title 8 and Title 11 for subdivision improvements. So should the city Planning and Zoning Commission find that those 6 standards of approval have been met, and you have those standards of approval because they're so long on the backs of the flow charts in front of you, then after the public has an opportunity to provide testimony, and you make your deliberations from this page. What would you like me to leave up for public comment?
We'll just leave that page up for now.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody have any questions for Donna?
Not this time.
Yeah. Wow,
Okay, that's
good job, Donna.
We'll now move on to the public comments portion of the meeting. Anyone who wants to offer comments regarding the subject case, please submit a completed form located on the table by the entrance doors. The forms must have your name, address, date, and whether you want to testify in support of, opposed to, or are neutral. Anyone planning to speak must do so at the podium so your remarks can be heard in the recording system. All questions and comments will be directed to the commission, not the applicant. The applicant will have the opportunity to answer questions and offer a rebuttal after all public testimony is completed. All speakers will need to state their name and address for the record before they begin speaking. I will call first those supporting the application, then those uncommitted, and finally those opposed to the application. And please note the commission is not here to answer questions. Did we have any?
Nope.
Did anyone want to speak that didn't fill out a form? No. Okay. We will move on to deliberation, correct?
You can close the public hearing.
Hmm?
Oh, we have rebuttal from the applicant.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mom.
Do you need to actually close the application before he...
What's that?
Thank you, guys. Couple things. I know there was a question about, when developments occur, the impact to the city and the costs and things of that nature. And the way that things are designed, developers pay for the cost of development and the impacts therein to parks, traffic, and so on and so forth. So as I stated initially, I think what's kind of unique about this one is that the developer is fixing an existing problem up front, rather than typically, houses would be built, impact fees would be received by the city, and then the city would go and do the road improvements. In this case, we're front-loading that and paying for those intersection improvements. So just wanted to point that out. there was a question, I think Donna brought up the intersection of Hayden and Hutter and the movement of it to the east, because there's a high-power transmission pole on the southeast corner of that intersection, one of those huge ones, right? And it's not something that's easy to be moved. It's a temporary intersection because we don't know what's gonna happen with Hutter. Thomas McNabb has written a letter, in general, in cooperative, fashion with this, because he knows that when he develops his land, he's gonna also have to set aside 225 feet, right? He doesn't get outside that, so he knows he can't build in that, if he chooses to develop. So, I suppose in the event that maybe he doesn't get what he wants or can't come to an agreement with the city with access and that sort of thing, I don't know that there's a limitation on developing the intersection in its current location. I think we just thought that moving it to the east made it easier to develop and get a full intersection out of it. So is that correct?
I'd say that's accurate. I think,
Come on.
it would be difficult to do it in its current location without getting some right-of-way or easement from those adjoining owners. I know we've had initial discussions with one of the two, and they were receptive. I'm of the belief that it's not impossible to do it within the current rights of way either. It just might, without those dedications, we might be looking at some walls, railings, those types of things to kind of cram everything in there. But we like the concept that we've got out there, and we hope that that comes to fruition.
Yeah. I think it makes more sense to move it to the east than to try to develop in its current location, because we can get a more functional intersection. So that was the logic there. So as Donna brought up, I would like to address the PUD length, because we have 4 phases, 2 to 3 years per. I don't think 5 years is gonna cut it. So I'm not sure the easiest way, but we would like to probably request 10, I think, for the PUD approval to allow for those 4 phases to be developed. I don't think it's gonna take 10, but we need that room, if possible. I think there was a comment about odor. There will be an odor, I guess, easement recorded to notify buyers, that exists, as well as the navigation easement for the airport. So I know there have been, sometimes homeowners will rent a house, and then the tenants complain about the airport noise or the odor, not knowing that there's some proximity to the treatment plant. So those will be both recorded and noted in the CC&R, so that we can make sure that property owners notice their tenants as well. So I think that's it. Any questions I can answer?
No. Thank you.
Thank you. One other thing too, we're only at 3.22 units per acre. This was annexed in with a 4 unit per acre. So hypothetically, that would have meant we could have gone to 510 units. So I just want to point that out, that we could have gone denser and we didn't, for what that's worth. So thank you guys.
No one on the commission has any further questions? No. All right, the hearing is now closed. No further questions or comments will be allowed from the public. Do we wish to proceed? Schedule deliberations for another date? What would we like to do?
So proceed?
You guys want to proceed? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyone have any comments?
Don't look at me first all the time.
I'm looking all the way down the line here.
Get those boys to contribute here.
I'll go first. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think staff did a great job of making some recommendations and some requirements. I think that there's some tricky things that are out of the ordinary in the ideas presented, considering, the nature of Hutter being not solidified, was dealt with well, and so I think a recommendation to approve is definitely on the table. I'd like to hear from the public before, saying that fully, but so far it looks good.
From the 30,000-foot view, everything fits, it appears to fit within the future master plan. And then also from a safety standpoint, it sounds like there's gonna be a lot of improvements that will benefit all the crazy driving that takes place on Hayden. So I think that's good. Those are my main comments and thoughts.
Okay, Mary?
Yeah, I think that overall this developer has taken safety in mind, and actually, I think that as a city, we need those improvements there on Hayden, and I think that will help. I also, I was asking about the trucks, the green space and whatnot, because I remember in subdivisions past, we've looked at the parks master plan and whatnot and tried to see, does this subdivision fit in that? Do we have the connectivity that provides, open space within the development, in addition to the parks? The parks are obvious, but to have the green space throughout also is an important aspect, and I think satisfies standards of approval on that. It definitely adds for variety of housing options that I think are important for a sustainable community, that add options for our residents. Ours, not just people coming in, but our kids, as they've grown up and become adults, that these options are important for them to start into homeownership as well. So I appreciate that about this subdivision. We already talked about transportation and that safety. That's an important element of this. I think the design is good. I think it enhances our community. The market's going to tell whether they'll be able to do it in a timely manner or not, as it should. And I think that the additional requirements that the staff is suggesting are important as well. That's my comments.
Chris?
I concur with all the previous comments.
Okay.
So,
No?
So, one thing I appreciate is the walls and buffer because of that commercial zone there. That could be quite loud and noisy and everything, and then the traffic that would incur. So I appreciate the walls and the green space buffer that you guys have created there. And then with the Hayden Road development, that's gonna obviously help everybody. The Hutter curve that you guys are doing there to moving the road to the east side of that pole there. I don't know if Rob can confirm or not, but I think that the curve and that's gonna help with slowing down of traffic instead of keeping it a straightaway. Just that curve will help slow down traffic. Hopefully, decrease some of the accidents that happen there. Obviously, there'll be light. I think this works with the standards of approval for specifically number 4 with the community design in green space, and I do appreciate that you guys have lessened the density by going with the 3.22 units per acre, so thank you for that. But That's pretty much all I've got to say.
Okay. So, it sounds like I'm hearing that everybody feels that they have met the conditions of approval. I think, yeah. Okay, standards of approval. Thank you. Obviously, number one, the development's consistent with the goals of the PUD. We see that there's adequate, number two, that there's adequate utilities, stormwater, those types of things. What else we have? Utilities, parking, I think is important. They did mention that with the townhomes, having additional parking plus a two-car garage in the townhome, I think is important because, as we know, most people only park on one side and fill the other half with all their stuff. And the fact that we do have the light industrial to have some storage potential there, I think having storage in your own neighborhood will also maybe help alleviate some of the parking issues. Integrated transportation, we see with the walking paths and the sidewalks. They've taken into account the streets and, you know, with the uncertainty of Hutter, I think still planned well for how they're gonna connect to the local area. And the design, and there's multiple uses with the townhomes, the smaller lots, so they've got a variety of economic or price point type situation here. The timely development, as we always say on that one, that's gonna be market driven, so I would not be opposed to granting a 10-year window on the PUD as a condition of approval, first. And then the buffer waiver, I guess that's a waiver of the buffer requirement on that north end with the airport, putting in a swale would make sense. But it sounds like we can also address that as they get to phase 4, so. So that would be my summary, I guess, so if anybody would like to make a motion.
Yeah, I just comment, I think that the things that, like the berm, the, you know, deferral of landscaping, that kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, I don't think we need to put those in our, we do need those in our conditions or not, or is those part of the design?
Well, you are going to accept their request.
Okay.
As part of your condition of approval of recommending this to city council.
Okay, okay.
I think there's one other thing that I would like to mention too. I like or I shouldn't say I like, but we're seeing a trend now for these developments that they are front-loading the street improvements, and one of the major complaints we are getting from the public is that development pay for itself, and that everybody's adding more traffic, but they're not doing anything about the roads. So instead of waiting for all these impact fees to come in and then improve the roads, it's heartening that we see the developers putting these items in and front-loading them, which is an added expense to the developer, but it also helps to pay for development. So I think that's a positive trend we're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's responsible, I like that.
Especially on Hayden, which we all know is an interesting road at times.
One other question.
Sure.
Just with the parks coming in phase 3, does anybody have any thoughts on that happening at that point in time in the development? I guess I bring it up again just because I know there's a lot of concern from the local community, people buying with the hopes of these things coming in, and understanding that other developments had the rug pulled on them, so to speak, of they had expectations of parks looking a certain way or being in a certain area, and that being totally different. And the concern is that their kids that they bought this house for are no longer gonna be of a park using age. So anyways, I'm happy to just allow it to go as is, if that's the norm and the standards have been met. I just wanted to see if anybody else had a thought on that.
Well, I would love to see it happen earlier, but I do understand the constraints.
Especially with the grading, the need for, I understand everything you were explaining. I just wanted to at least bring it up before we make a motion.
I understand.
Everything, buy a playground from Costco and just put it in the middle of the development right now.
I agree.
$1,000 versus.
Doesn't work for those townhomes.
Okay, you guys.
Any other discussion?
I'll make a comment. I can't believe I'm arguing the opposite side of this, but to be fair, you have to make money in order to pay for an 8-acre park.
Yeah, of course.
And so you got to give them a chance to sell something.
15 acres.
They're already front loading the traffic. That's more important to the community as a whole than one park. And so I think we got to take the win on that. And let them have a chance to make some money so they can pay for the park. At least it's in phase 3 and not phase 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Understood.
Which is why I'm happy with things moving forward as is. I just wanted to get somebody else's.
I think it's a valid point.
Yeah.
No, it's.
I would have brought it, yeah. I think it's a valid point. I think it just needs to be balanced.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with the motion to approve, do we need to include the verbiage about the 10-year permit and the buffer?
yes.
And the buffer on the north end?
Yeah, it would be a waiver of the buffer requirement on the north end as requested by the applicant. The deferral of the frontage improvements on the west side along Hutter as requested by the applicant. And an extension. Oh, go ahead. And then the extension of the 5-year time frame to 10 would all be part of the motion, yes.
Just say what Fonda
Got it.
said.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Recommend approval.
Or I move to recommend approval of the PZE 24-0129 Hayden Sky FPUD request with staff recommended conditions of approval and the 3 items that were just brought up. Finding the request is in accord with the standards of Hayden City Code based upon testimony received at the PZE hearing and the record of the request.
I'll second that.
Good job.
Are we good with that? And then I'll fill it in?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Erickson,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morris,
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson,
Aye?
Vice Chair Howard,
Yes.
and Chair Taylor.
Aye. Okay. Where are we now? All right, the motion has been recommended for approval to the city council. We'll now move on to the Donna's report. And if you all don't have to stick around for the rest of our meeting, so if you'd like to go, you're free
We
to go.
won't see it as rude.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So the next meeting is next Monday.
Next Monday.
Next Monday.
Okay. What do we have next Monday?
I believe that we have the written recommendation from this and a workshop. So we're gonna, we have the joint workshop with City Council and some of these code amendments, and they tasked us with some additional work. And so we'll go back and work on that.
Okay.
And then we'll have potentially, there might be a public hearing for that meeting in March.
Are we 1st and 4th in March?
Your first and third.
Always.
Oh, we're 1st and
Back to
3rd.
first and
Well,
third.
not this month?
We're back to
We're back
first
to
and
With
third.
this exception because.
Yeah.
No more holidays for us.
So then the other thing is that the city council has, the city council on there has directed staff to work with SCJ Alliance to bring forward an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And so we were working on a calendar of time to make that happen. And we were looking at the June and July calendars to get public hearings to fit in around the holidays, correct? Help me out, Shannon.
Yes.
So when we are looking at the holidays and kind of looking at calendars, trying to get public workshops in, because we'll have 2 public workshops with planning and zoning and city council as we're working through this process. We also then need to go to public hearing once with planning and zoning commission, and then a follow-up public hearing with the city council in conformance with our code. And so we're just trying to figure out if we're looking at the end of the month in June. Rhonda needs to look at her calendar too, so.
No, I will be right back, just don't.
We need to ensure that you guys will potentially be available the Monday. 4th of July lands on a Friday?
Friday.
Yes.
Saturday.
So the third, June
If you guys
30th.
are available the Monday before that,
Would be June 30th.
so June 30th, for a public hearing, for us to schedule that and try to get things to all fit.
What are they, what they're wanting to do an amendment to the comprehensive plan? Is that?
Yeah, so the goals and policies that you guys have been working on, that they've met with the consultant, and this consultant has identified that in order to put those into place, that they would require a full amendment. So that process would start virtually immediately in order to get a draft comprehensive plan update for publication notices to get to a public hearing by the end of June. So we're trying to kind of make sure that we can meet that timeline that we proposed.
Okay.
And we wanted to do it far enough ahead so that you guys could plan accordingly and give us some big red flags if you thought that you couldn't make that Monday work, so that we wouldn't.
So we'd be looking at
Making the schedules work.
changing the June 16th meeting to June 30th. So we would have one the first Monday, and then you've got 3 Mondays in between, and then you've got the 30th.
Okay. So it wouldn't be more meetings, we just need to
Right,
push
we
it
would just
around and
move,
make it work.
move it down for noticing, and then would we go back to the normal 1st and 3rd in July, so we'd have the back-to-back.
In July.
Well, technically, June 30th, and then again, July 7th, potentially, I mean, yeah.
Have work to do.
It's, yep, exactly. So we're just curious if, A, we would have a quorum on June 30th if we were able to.
I should be able to be there. That's a day I'm returning from vacation. And I'm not sure the flight times and that type of stuff, but I think I can make that. 16th, I would not be able to.
So that works better.
Yep.
Yeah, looks open to me right now, so.
Yeah, mine looks good.
Look into my crystal ball.
I can't plan 2 weeks out, you're asking me a couple months. But yes,
Okay.
All right,
perfect.
all I have.
That's it. Anything
So the
else?
workshop on Monday, this coming, is just us?
Okay. Anything else, anyone? Meeting is adjourned.
I mean, should we-